Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. So before we get started, we want you to pay close attention. We know we're really close to lunch, but the best part of this session is that after these few minutes, you get free lunch. So that's going to be really good. So before we get started, please pay attention to this ad. Pay very close attention. The only thing that I want to say is it might make some people uncomfortable in the audience. So you've been warned.
Hey, Mum.
How are you, love?
Yeah, I'm good. But I miss you guys.
We're just talking about you.
Hey, bro.
Hey,
You're missing out on this.
Not the same here without you, darling.
Hi, love. Tried to call you.
We're all packed up here. I just wanted to show you around one last time. I really didn't need to be living in this big house with all you boys gone.
Hey, bro. Me and the boys had an idea for Mum's 60th.
How was listening to the second part of that ad? I want you guys to take a moment. So find the closest person next to you, doesn't matter to the left or to the right. Spend a few seconds talking about how it made you feel, missing on the dialogue, missing on a little bit of the information that was present on that ad. So I'll give you a few seconds. All right. I think that's enough. Everyone is very hungry, so let's get to it. Now, you probably share your feelings thinking about the ad that you just saw. Just raise your hand if you felt a little bit confused, a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit pissed off because you couldn't really get the full story. That's a few of you, and I think there's more, but probably some of you don't know what's going on. The thing is, this is the reality of millions of people in Australia. People that can't hear, they can't see, they are suffering with sensory overload, for example, and we don't really think about them in our media experiences. We're missing a big part of that. And that is a constant challenge for millions of people, and we tend to forget them.
Thanks, Asier. So as we kick off the next sort of 10 or so minutes, we wanted to start by sharing 3 really important things with you. Number 1 is never before in the history of MFAX have we actually covered the topic of disability. And I'm sure that you'll agree with us that it's a damn important one, right? For our industry, for our audiences, but I would also argue for any of us that have kids, nieces or nephews in the room, this is a generation that is going to grow up and expect a much deeper sense of belonging and a much deeper sense of representation. But on a more fun note, number 2, Asier, Paws and I, we're showing up here together today as mates. Like, we have a really special and unique kinship. I think we're really bound together in solidarity when it comes to creating positive change in our industry. That means leaving our industry and our people and our audiences in a much better place than when we started. We are part of the MFA Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Advisory Council. And today we are going to ask you to hold space, we are going to challenge you, and we're going to ask you to take action when it comes to greater diversity and greater representation in media planning and buying. Number 3, by this stage of the presentation, you're probably thinking, who the hell are these people? Well, I see lots of smiling, friendly faces in the room. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Phil Moig from PhD, and I'm mum to Archer and Mila, but I'm going to talk about Mila for just a second. Not because she's a favourite child. I don't have a favourite child. But Mila is 7, and she's an incredibly proud First Nations Wiradjuri girl. And she also happens to be neurodivergent. And so for my baby girl, I am hell-bent on making sure that she grows up in a world where she knows that her Aboriginality and her neurodivergence are her absolute sources of superpower. They are never to be her sources of shame. Asier?
Hola everyone, I'm Asier Carazo from Atomic 212, and since joining the MFA D&I Advisory Council, I have been able to step out of the bubble. Let's agree it. We all feel like we are in a bubble when we are in this industry, and we tend to very rarely look outside it. We love talking about ourselves, and we love talking about the work that we do, which is awesome, but we're probably missing on some bits on how do we deliver more inclusive media experiences? How do we step out of the bubble? So this session is a bit of an invite for all of you to step outside of the bubble. We're going to come back after lunch into the advertising bubble, so don't worry. But I want you guys to think and put yourself in the shoes of other people in this country. Pawena.
Thanks, Asier. And I'm Pawena Kaniah from iProspect. Most of you familiar faces in the crowd know me as Paws. It's only been 4 years for me in this industry, and I'm not going to lie, and it's something that I don't admit very often publicly, or probably I do. Finding my feet in this industry was not super easy. I walked into this industry as a highly opinionated and confident girl, but somehow, something in me muted. I started wearing the same clothes as everybody else because I already stood out, quite literally. I still today go into rooms and look around, and the first thing that comes to my brain is, how the hell am I still the only one in the room? And in the same way that I've consistently had to navigate cultural differences and assert myself, that has actually comprised of also dragging chairs to tables where I was not always necessarily invited on. And in that same manner, I want each and every single one of you today to hold space for somebody incredibly special, somebody who has a lived experience to share with us. Please put your hands together for a dear friend and industry mate, Angus.
Thanks so much, guys. If you don't mind, another round of applause for the MFA D&I Council. Yeah, they do a lot of work behind the scenes, and it's really important work. But thank you for introducing me, Paws. My name's Angus McLeod. I'm an investment executive at OMD and have been working in the media industry since 2018. I actually got my first start on the street team driving around the Black Thunders and haven't looked back since. I also do a bit of stand-up comedy and have been loving performing shows for the past 4 years. I have no greater passion than to make people laugh, and advertising, of course. On October 2nd, 2022, I had actually just done a show and met up with some mates afterwards to watch the footy. That night, I was assaulted in Brisbane City, leaving me with a fractured skull and a mild traumatic brain injury. 3 days later, I was told that the skull fracture had severed the connection in my middle ear, leaving me profoundly deaf. Fortunately, I was a perfect candidate for these devices called cochlear implants. Basically, a technology that's capable of translating audio into electronic pulses the brain can understand. Whilst I am incredibly grateful that this technology exists, it's important to know that my hearing is very different to what it was before. Sometimes I have to say, sorry, can you say that again? Or can you give me some context as to what's happening here? Put simply, my hearing's not very good. But if I'm in a room where I can't speak or I simply don't have the courage to speak, sometimes I'm left in the dark. And not because of choice, but because of something completely out of my control. Now, you might be going, nice sob story, Angus. What does this have to do with advertising? I'm not the only one that has issues with consuming media. And whilst this has been a challenge, as a media professional, it's made me acutely aware of not only the possibilities, but also the importance of accessibility in media. Thanks.
Incredible courage coming up here on stage and sharing your story. So thank you so much, Angus. Another round of applause because and you said something, you felt left in the dark. A lot of Australians feel left in the dark. Now I'm going to ask you guys to participate. Just raise your hand if you have gone out of your way or you have purposely created a media plan, an advertising campaign that was tailored for people with sensory disabilities. Yeah, that's pretty fuck all, I have to say. So we spend billions of dollars in this room, and we're not thinking about 4.4 million of Australians that can either hear or see. When we started preparing this presentation, we wanted to find some inspiring case studies to show you guys the great work that is being done there. The reality is, fuck all again. There's one example that we found, so I'm gonna let Pawena tell us a little bit more about it, but we expect to see an improvement in the next 12 months.
Thanks, Asier. During the course of this research, Phil and I went into a room and studied various different briefs, both from agencies and media partners. And I reckon as an industry, we're extremely guilty of consistently always briefing and planning audiences with that very infamous people 25 to 54. Now let me hit you with some hard statistics. Slap next to what I just said, the fact that 1 in 6 Australians today live with a disability, both visible and invisible. That for you is 4 million Aussies. So it's not just essential or logical to actually include them in those briefs, but it's probably very certainly the right thing to do. Fortunately, we did come across one such campaign called This Girl Can. And this was a piece of work conducted by our friends at OMD. It was essentially a government initiative about empowering women, regardless of the walks of life they came from, to stay active and fit without the fear of judgment. Now, let's pause on that, and I want Phil to tell us a bit about the audience exploration of that one.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So, as OMD worked through their audience exploration for this campaign, they actually stopped for a minute and they thought, but what about the 2 million women in Australia who live with disabilities? Because don't they deserve to be active and participate in this campaign as well? And what they also thought about was the fact that, you know, most of us in this room, we probably can't really begin to imagine some of the daily challenges that these women face. So OMD approached Vision Australia. And for those of you who don't know what Vision Australia do, they are an audio publisher for the blind and the visually impaired community. And together they created a podcast series which was specifically targeted and aimed to women in Australia living with disability. And sure, like, podcasts are nothing new, right? But this one was different because this wasn't just content. This was actually representation. And it was hosted by women with real lived experience who shared some pretty deep and moving and emotional stories with their audience. So as a result of that campaign, it didn't just inspire its listeners, it actually created lasting positive community impact and community engagement.
I actually love that campaign, and not just because OMD had a hand in it. But yeah, seriously, it's inspiring to see that briefs of that magnitude are actually considering people in similar situations to myself. And you'll notice they use 3 key elements: consultation, representation, and amplification. Talk to the experts, make sure the right voices are being represented, and then amplifying those voices with enough media dollars.
Thank you guys for sharing that example. It's a very powerful one, but we haven't seen many of those. And this was a campaign that was specific for inclusion. So what we want to do is give you some tips to start thinking about having accessibility features on every single campaign, even on the broadest and biggest campaigns that you might be designing right now. Pawena, do you want to tell us a little bit more about it?
I think as Angus and Phil, you touch on interesting points, because as an industry, we always think that when we have to do our parts, it's always actually about getting a brief that is targeting people living with disability. And very often, we're way too quick to put our hands up in the air and say, but we don't have control over the creatives, right? We don't get to choose who gets to be part of the assets, who gets to be behind the scenes when deciding those asset choices as well. But we do have something super powerful, and that's something that Mitchell Long touched upon in his previous presentation, that's collaboration. We do have the power during those media buying and planning processes to actually make a choice. And that choice starts with starting to use accessibility features present in various big tech platforms already, whether it's your Meta or Google, or even just leaning on your friendly SEO teams. We've got things like alt text and captions. Now, I'll just do a quick show of hands. How many of you in the audience know the difference between open and closed captions? In Melbourne, I had 2 show of hands out of an audience of 700. Today, I honestly thought I would be getting more hands up, and that was just one, and that was our lovely MC who did attend the session in Melbourne. And I think that speaks a lot, right? That speaks volumes. Something as simple as open and closed captions, something that we actually do have power on that whenever we're consuming YouTube, for example. Now that's at a big tech international platform. Phil, tell us a bit more about local publishers.
Yeah, so there is, great news is there is a lot being done from a publisher level locally in Australia. And we're seeing some publishers really invest quite heavily when it comes to accessibility features in how they produce their content for our audiences. So a couple that we want to call out in particular are SBS and QMS. And they really are investing in, whether it be audio descriptions, closed captions, subtitles, just to name a few. But I think our challenge to all of the planners and buyers and decision makers in this room is we want you to think about accessibility just as you would, as a foundational element of your media planning and buying. So when you're thinking about CPMs and engagement rates, are you also thinking about accessibility as one of those core, fundamental and foundational practices in how we plan and buy every day?
Well, I think you might have known there'd be some sort of rally cry or call to action. I think everybody in this room sort of understands that the fact that we're here means we have a little bit of a responsibility to enact change, and not just because of greater reach or possibilities, but also because it's the right thing to do. We think this can come about in 4 ways. The first one being challenging our clients to create inclusive and considered briefs.
The second one is agencies. You guys are here in the room, strategists, planners, buyers. You guys need to be at the helm of inclusive media planning.
Number 3, conversations with your clients and creative agencies. Challenge, pushback. Inclusion is not an afterthought. It is very much a forethought.
And number 4, let's elevate and celebrate and acknowledge our media publishers who are investing so heavily in accessibility. But equally, we all have a responsibility to really challenge those publishers who are not.
So as we start to wrap up, just a couple of things on my end. Give me a show of hands if starting tomorrow you're going to start thinking about implementing some accessibility features on your campaigns.
Yes.
That tells me, I'm very proud of that, that tells me that in a year's time we will be talking about great stories when it comes to making advertising more accessible for everyone. The second thing is, you're no one if you don't have a QR code on your presentation at MFAX. So we do have a QR code, so go and scan it. This QR code is going to give you access to a series of case studies, the tips that we presented today. So literally tomorrow, you can start working on creating more inclusive media plans.
Thank you for your attention so far. There's just something that I also want to acknowledge. You would have remembered at the beginning of my bit, I said that it was hard for me to find my feet coming into this industry. And thanks to this lovely collective of people and the rest of the members of the council who are not on stage today, I did find a place to call home in this industry. And last year, we launched a series called Changing Perspectives. And if you are on LinkedIn, you've been, looking at various trade press, you would actually have come across those stories. And they actually are stories coming from you, members of the audience, who are, and I don't like using the word brave enough, but who are happy to share your lived experiences, helping us to paint a vivid snapshot of where, as an industry, not only are we falling short towards our peers, but even just in our media. Fun fact, when senior leadership came forward and shared their stories, we saw more traction on LinkedIn. So far, they were, I think, 35 plus gorgeous stories. Highly encourage you all to go ahead and read them. And now, just to conclude, if there's anything that you really have to take away from our presentation today, the ask is simple and singular. The power is with you. Make accessibility features a non-negotiable when it comes to creating and responding to briefs. because we can do better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.